Someone is standing beside you today not because of a single loud victory, not because of one dramatic moment, not because you were perfect or fearless, but because over time you quietly proved what consistency looks like. You showed up when there was no applause. You kept going when progress was invisible. You stayed when leaving would have been easier, faster, and more comfortable. And that steady presence, that repeated choice to remain committed, built something stronger than talent or luck ever could. Trust. Consistency is not glamorous. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It doesn't demand attention. Most days, it feels ordinary, repetitive, even boring. Yet it is precisely this ordinariness that makes it powerful. Anyone can be passionate for a day. Anyone can try hard for a week. But to keep going when motivation fades, when results are slow, when doubt creeps in, that is rare. And rarity is magnetic. People notice it even when they don't say it out loud. They feel it before they understand it. They stay because they sense stability in a world that changes too fast. Someone standing beside you is evidence that your effort mattered beyond you. It means your discipline created safety. Your reliability created confidence. Your persistence created belief. You may not remember every moment you showed up, but they do. They remember the days you didn't quit. The days you returned. The days you chose patience over impulse. Over time, those days stacked on top of each other and turned into a reputation. Not a loud one, but a deep one. Consistency speaks a language that doesn't need words. It says, "You can count on me." It says, "I won't disappear when things get hard." It says, "I'm not here only for the easy parts." In relationships, in work, in personal growth, that message is priceless. It lowers defenses. It builds loyalty. It creates a sense of togetherness that cannot be forced. People don't stand beside uncertainty. They stand beside patterns they trust. Often, we underestimate how closely we are being watched. Not watched in a judgmental way, but in a human way. People look for signals. Will this person stay? Will they remain the same when circumstances change? Will they still care when there's nothing to gain? Every time you acted in alignment with your values. Every time you followed through instead of making excuses, you answered those questions without realizing it. And slowly, someone decided you were safe to walk with. Consistency is also humility in action. It accepts that growth is gradual. That mastery takes time. That meaningful connections are built through repetition, not intensity. When you choose consistency, you choose long-term over short-term. You choose depth over drama. And that choice shapes how others experience you. They don't feel rushed by you. They don't feel manipulated by sudden bursts of effort followed by silence. They feel steadiness. And steadiness invites closeness, Someone standing beside you also means you allowed yourself to be seen over time. Consistency requires exposure. You can't hide behind one good performance or one good impression. You show your flaws, your tired days, your slow days. And still, you continue. That honesty builds authenticity. It tells others that you are real, not curated. Real people are easier to stand beside than perfect ones. Perfect ones feel temporary. Real ones feel enduring. There were probably moments when you questioned whether it was worth it. When you wondered if anyone noticed. When it felt like your effort was dissolving into nothing. Consistency often feels thankless in the moment. It asks for faith before proof. But proof always comes later, quietly, in forms like loyalty, respect, and presence. Proof looks like someone choosing you again, not because they have to, but because they want to. The presence of another person beside you is also a reflection of who you became through consistency. You became someone who doesn't need to impress, because you've already proven. Someone who doesn't need to chase, because your actions attract. Someone who doesn't panic at setbacks, because you trust the process you've repeated so many times. That calm confidence is contagious. People gravitate toward those who are grounded in who they are. Consistency builds character in silence. It shapes your habits, your mindset, your emotional resilience. And character is felt long before it is explained. Someone standing beside you feels your character. They feel the predictability of your values, the stability of your reactions, the reliability of your word. In a world where inconsistency is common, that feeling is rare and comforting. It's important to understand that consistency does not mean rigidity. It doesn't mean never changing or adapting. It means your core remains intact while your methods evolve. It means your effort doesn't disappear just because conditions shift. People standing beside you trust that even if plans change, your commitment won't. That distinction matters. It separates dependable people from merely routine ones. Sometimes, the person standing beside you stayed longer than they originally intended. Not because you convinced them, but because your consistency slowly removed their reasons to leave. Doubt faded. Hesitation softened. Walls lowered. What remained was connection built on repeated evidence rather than promises. Consistency doesn't beg for belief, it earns it. There is also courage in being consistent. Courage to be misunderstood in the early stages. Courage to continue when results don't match effort yet. Courage to resist the temptation to constantly reinvent yourself just to stay interesting. You trusted that being steady was enough. And that trust paid off. Someone saw that courage and felt stronger walking next to you. When someone stands beside you, it doesn't mean you were flawless. It means you were faithful. To the process, to the values, to the journey. You likely made mistakes. You likely stumbled. But you didn't disappear. You returned, adjusted, and continued. That resilience is deeply attractive. It shows that setbacks are not exits for you, they are lessons. Consistency also teaches others how to treat you. By showing up regularly, you set a standard. You showed that your time, energy, and presence have value. People who recognize that value choose to stay close. They align themselves with what is stable because stability feels like progress. In many ways, consistency is love expressed through action. Not just romantic love, but respect, care, dedication, and responsibility. It is choosing again and again, even on days when the feeling isn't strong. Someone standing beside you likely felt loved without grand gestures, simply because you were there. Presence, repeated over time, becomes devotion. You may not fully see the impact you've had. Consistency often hides its rewards behind time. But look at who is still there. Look at who didn't walk away. Look at who trusts you without needing constant reassurance. That is your reward. That is the echo of your discipline. There is also a quiet leadership in consistency. You didn't force anyone to follow. You didn't demand loyalty. You led by example. And example is the most persuasive form of influence. Someone chose to stand beside you because your actions made the path feel safer, clearer, and more worthwhile. As you continue forward, remember this: consistency is not something you perform once and retire. It is a practice, a daily choice. And every day you continue, you reinforce the reason someone is still with you. You don't need to suddenly become more intense or more impressive. You only need to remain true to the rhythm that brought you here. In moments when you feel tired, remember that your consistency has already changed lives in ways you may never fully understand. It has created trust where there was uncertainty. It has built bridges where there were gaps. It has turned solitude into companionship. Someone is standing beside you because you proved what consistency looks like. Not in theory. Not in words. But in lived experience. And that proof is stronger than any speech, louder than any promise, and more lasting than any momentary success. So keep going. Not because you need to prove anything again, but because consistency is who you are now. And who you are has already made a difference, and even now, there are days when you forget the weight of what you've built. Days when it feels ordinary again, when the magic seems gone, when you wonder if standing steady still matters. But consistency doesn't lose its power just because it becomes familiar. In fact, that familiarity is proof of its success. What once required effort now feels natural. What once demanded discipline now flows like instinct. You didn't lose the value, you embodied it. The person beside you senses this, even in silence. They feel the calm that comes from knowing what to expect, not in a dull way, but in a grounding way. There is comfort in not having to question intentions. There is peace in not having to decode actions. Your consistency removed confusion from the equation, and clarity is one of the rarest gifts we can give another human being. You didn't just show consistency in big moments. You showed it in small ones, the follow-ups, the check-ins, the patience, the listening. You stayed present in conversations that didn't benefit you. You gave effort when no reward was guaranteed. You maintained standards even when shortcuts were available. Those small moments are invisible to the world, but unforgettable to the people who experience them. There's a certain strength that grows inside someone who lives this way. You stop rushing to prove yourself. You stop needing constant validation. You become less reactive and more intentional. And that inner steadiness changes how you move through life. People notice that you don't crumble under pressure or disappear under stress. You bend, adjust, and remain. That kind of resilience invites respect without demanding it. Consistency also refined your patience. It taught you that timing matters, that forcing outcomes often breaks them, and that some things only respond to time and care. You learned to wait without quitting, to trust without clinging, to invest without controlling. That emotional maturity is rare, and rare qualities attract loyal company. Sometimes, someone stands beside you not because life is easy with you, but because life is honest with you. You don't pretend challenges don't exist. You don't mask discomfort with false optimism. You acknowledge reality and still choose to continue. That balance between realism and commitment is powerful. It makes people feel understood rather than pressured. You also gave permission for others to be consistent too. By modeling steadiness, you set an unspoken expectation. Growth is gradual, effort is ongoing. And presence matters. People often rise to the level of consistency they witness. Your example quietly invited them to match your pace, to invest more deeply, to show up more fully. There were moments when consistency meant restraint. When you could have reacted but chose reflection. When you could have walked away but chose conversation. When you could have spoken harshly but chose understanding. Those moments didn't feel heroic at the time, but they shaped trust in profound ways. Trust is not built through intensity, it is built through emotional regulation repeated over time. Someone standing beside you today may never list all the reasons they stayed. They may not even consciously know them. But if they paused long enough, they would realize it wasn't one thing, it was everything added together. The pattern. The reliability. The way you didn't change your character based on mood or convenience. Consistency also protects relationships from unnecessary damage. It prevents the emotional whiplash caused by unpredictability. It allows space for mistakes without fear of abandonment. When people know you won't vanish at the first sign of difficulty, they feel safe enough to be honest. And honesty deepens connection far more than perfection ever could. You didn't just build consistency outwardly, you built it within yourself. You learned to trust your own follow-through. You proved to yourself that you can commit and continue. That self-trust is foundational. When you trust yourself, others feel it. It shows in your posture, your tone, your decisions. Confidence rooted in evidence is quiet, but unshakable. There's also a kind of dignity in consistency. You don't chase trends or validation. You don't abandon values to fit rooms. You carry yourself the same way whether you're celebrated or ignored. That dignity creates presence. And presence makes people want to stand near you, not behind you, not ahead of you, but beside you. As time moves forward, consistency will continue to reveal its rewards in subtle ways. In conversations that feel easier. In conflicts that resolve faster. In trust that doesn't need constant repair. You'll notice that relationships built on consistency require less maintenance, not because they lack depth, but because they rest on solid ground. There may come a time when you outgrow certain paths, certain roles, certain versions of yourself. Consistency doesn't trap you there. It carries you forward with integrity. Even when you change direction, people respect the way you do it, thoughtfully, honestly, without burning what once mattered. That respect is another reason people stay close. You don't need to romanticize consistency. It's not always beautiful. Sometimes it's lonely. Sometimes it's exhausting. Sometimes it feels like you're giving more than you're receiving. But over time, balance returns. Not necessarily in equal measure, but in meaningful ways. Presence is one of those ways. Someone standing beside you is a reminder that effort compounds. That nothing genuine is wasted. That the days you showed up tired still counted. That the patience you practiced reshaped outcomes you'll never fully trace back to a single moment, and even if someday that person walks a different path, your consistency will not be undone. What you built within yourself remains. The discipline. The steadiness. The character. Those are permanent gains. They will echo in future connections, future endeavors, future versions of you. For now, let yourself acknowledge this quietly. Not with pride that seeks attention, but with gratitude that recognizes growth. You didn't arrive here by accident. You arrived here by repetition. By choosing again and again to be the kind of person who stays true even when it's inconvenient, someone is standing beside you because you proved what consistency looks like. And every step you take forward with that same steadiness continues to write a story that doesn't need to be announced to be felt. And when you look ahead, understand this: consistency is not something you finish, it is something you live. It becomes the quiet rhythm beneath everything you do. It shapes how you speak when emotions are high, how you act when no one is watching, how you remain when circumstances shift. It becomes less about effort and more about identity. You don't ask yourself whether to show up anymore. You simply do. The person standing beside you may not say it often, but your steadiness gives them room to breathe. It gives them permission to slow down, to be human, to not have everything figured out. Your presence doesn't rush them or pressure them. It anchors them. In a world that constantly demands more, faster, louder, you offer something rare: continuity. You've learned that consistency doesn't mean always being strong. Sometimes it means being honest about weakness and still staying engaged. Sometimes it means resting without quitting. Sometimes it means pausing without disappearing. That nuance matters. It shows maturity. It shows that your commitment isn't fragile, dependent on perfect conditions. Over time, consistency also softened your ego. You stopped needing to be right all the time. You became more open to listening, more willing to adjust, more focused on progress than pride. That humility deepened your connections. People don't feel like they're competing with you. They feel like they're building with you. There is a quiet intimacy that grows when someone knows you won't change overnight. When your values don't fluctuate with mood. When your care doesn't vanish under stress. That intimacy isn't loud or dramatic. But it is lasting. It is the kind that survives seasons, distance, and difficulty. You may notice that fewer things shake you now. Not because you stopped caring, but because you learned where to place your energy. Consistency taught you discernment. You no longer react to everything, you respond to what matters. That calm focus creates a sense of safety for those around you. They trust your reactions because they know they come from thought, not impulse. At some point, you stopped proving yourself and started expressing yourself. The need to convince faded because your actions already spoke. And in that silence, your influence grew. Influence rooted in consistency doesn't demand attention, it earns it. Someone standing beside you today is not an accident of timing or convenience. It is alignment. Alignment with your values, your pace, your way of being. They walk with you because your consistency makes the journey feel real, not rushed, not uncertain, but grounded. And if there are moments when you walk alone, remember this too: consistency still holds you. It keeps you upright when affirmation is absent. It reminds you who you are when no one is watching. It continues shaping your future even in solitude. You are never starting from nothing again. The most powerful thing about consistency is that it leaves evidence behind. Evidence in trust. Evidence in presence. Evidence in people who choose you without needing persuasion. That evidence cannot be erased by a bad day or a slow season, so don't underestimate what you've done. Don't minimize the days you kept going quietly. Those days built a life that others feel safe stepping into. They built a version of you that doesn't need to chase connection, it attracts it naturally. Someone is standing beside you because you proved what consistency looks like. And as long as you continue to honor that truth, your path will never truly be empty. It will always carry meaning, depth, and the quiet strength of someone who stayed.